watching the Mystical Green Beanie.
Hey, what's going on, dudes and dudettes? I am the Mystical Green Beanie, and I'm gonna make this one real quick. I hate nostalgia. I legitimately hate nostalgia. I feel like it does nothing but perpetuate the degeneration of culture, because it stagnates progress. Now, that's not to say that I look down on those who look to the past for inspiration, or think that we should ignore the past. That's not what I'm saying at all. If anything, the past should be celebrated. I just don't want it to be lived in. Now, I feel like we should look towards the future, build new things, and put new twists on old things, making them new again. Which is fundamentally different from simply digging up something old and trying to coast off the memories that people might have of it. But that's where I'm coming from in regards to nostalgia in a general setting. I think that's how I'm supposed to phrase that? I'm not sure. But you get the idea. Now, how does that relate to geek culture and comics specifically? Okay, so where do I start? So, this is less of an issue that affects independent works because, with the exception of Dynamite Comics, which almost exclusively banks off of telling stories with old pulp heroes from the 30s, 40s, and 50s, a lot of non-Marvel DC comic series are original stories. However, when it comes to the more mainstream material, that's where we start running into problems. Now, that's not to say that there aren't still original ideas coming from mainstream comics, because there are. But for the sake of making my point, I'm gonna have to play the generalization game. Because how much of comics these days is just calling back to older material from the 70s, 80s, and 90s? How many times does Marvel call back to Days of Futures Past, or the death of Gwen Stacy? How many times does DC call back to the death of Superman, or Crisis on Infinite Earths? Like, yeah, those events happened, and yeah, they were big. Like, really big. And I'm not saying the influence shouldn't be felt, but we don't have to keep revisiting those old ideas, do we? You know, isn't that how these characters and these worlds grow stagnant? I also think it's kind of slightly, somewhat egregious when old characters who've been dead or gone from continuity are brought back because Marvel and DC editorial were choking on member berries. And I mean that in DC's case quite literally. Barry Allen literally has one of the greatest, if not the greatest death in superhero comics. He dies saving the multiverse. And from then on, he becomes superhero Jesus. I mean, I know a lot of people regard Superman as superhero Jesus, but come on. The Chad Anti-Monitor versus the Virgin Doomsday. Yeah, Barry Allen is superhero Jesus, and that's just that. So, yeah. Anyways, the point is that there was no reason to bring Barry Allen back from the dead, because since his return, all DC has done with him, as far as comics are concerned, is retcon his origin, turning him into yet another super orphan, and break the DC universe, which was the last significant thing that the character has done. And that was 8 years ago. And it's not just heroes this happens to either. It's villains too. Prime example, Kraven the Hunter. Dude has one of the most mind-blowing deaths in what's hailed as one of the greatest Spider-Man stories of all time. And it's undone with an event called Grim Hunter, or some shit, I don't know. And he's never as cool as he was in Kraven's Last Hunt. Ever. And don't even get me started on reunions that keep bringing back the same old characters over and over again. Like, good God, how many times are we going to relaunch the New Mutants? I swear, whenever Marvel gets the chance, they relaunch the New Mutants with the same cast from the original New Mutants team from 1982. Instead of, I don't know, building a fresh team of new mutants, while the original New Mutants join the official X-Men roster? And if you think that's preposterous, then take a look at what DC's done and has been doing with the Titans. That same exact team from 1964 has been resurrected, I don't know how many times, instead of living up to the promise of actually turning those characters into the Justice League? I mean, for God's sakes, by now, the heroes from the original lineup have either taken up the mantle of their mentors, had sidekicks of their own, gotten married and had children, or even buried their children. Yet, we keep them locked into the status quo. And in saying that it's frustrating is a bit of an understatement. And, I don't know, I'm not dropping comics, you know, that's not what I want to do. Mostly because outside of skateboarding, I have like zero interest or hobbies that force my antisocial ass to actually interact with other human beings on a weekly basis. But I am disappointed with the medium for, you know, always defaulting on what's familiar as opposed to being daring. Because I like when comics take risks. I like when they actually surprise me and take me on an adventure. And that's not to say that new is always better. Sometimes radically changing something for the sake of radically changing something and turning it into something that people don't even recognize is just as bad as stagnation. It's just on the polar opposite end of the spectrum. But I don't think subverting expectations and playing with the audience's conventions is a bad thing either. That said, Marvel and DC as corporate entities aren't 100% to blame for this stagnation in comics either. It's also your fault, as well as my fault. The consumer should be held responsible for this degeneration of comics culture because we continue to give Marvel and DC our money when they bring back characters from the dead or relaunch old comic franchises. Because it reminds us of our childhood. Anyways, those are my thoughts, but what about you? Do you agree with me? Do you just think I'm some crusty ass zoomer who wants to watch the old guard burn to the ground? Let me know down below in the comments section. Also, if you like this video, hit the like button, share it, support the channel, and if you want to see more content like this, all you have to do is subscribe. I'm the Mystical Green Beanie. Thanks for watching, and as always, until next time, adios nachos, adios.